Okay, before we bring up our guest speaker, one of the things that I wanted to mention as far as economic development, Scott Martinez brought this to our board, working with the city and council about retail and retail analysis, which we thought it's a good thing to do. And that's part of the Hutto Economic Development Corporation, how we work together with everyone. And I thought it was a good thing to do. The board approved it, and we went ahead forward to do the analysis. When I start talking about Joey Grisham, he's a retail consultant. During his 10 years in local economic development positions and retail consulting, Joey has been involved with retail from many different angles. He successfully led local economic development agencies in Texas, Alabama, and Mississippi, and is one of less than 300 individuals in the U.S. to possess a master's degree in economic development. Joey began his retail consulting career with a retail firm called The Retail Coach, where he worked on a number of retail market studies across the U.S., including Texas, Wisconsin, Tennessee, Arizona, and Indiana. Over the years, he has developed a large network of retailers and retail industry professionals. He holds degrees from the University of Mississippi, University of Memphis, and the University of Southern Mississippi. Originally from North Mississippi, Joey is married with 2 children and lives in Granbury, Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Joey Grisham.
Thanks, Mario. Can everybody hear me all right? I'm a Methodist preacher's kid, so I should be able to talk pretty loud. I'll tell you a story about my dad. He was a little bit of a perfectionist, and he was a great motivator. And he was serving a church in Hollandale, Mississippi. I'm sure you've all been there on vacation. Little town on the Mississippi Delta, on Highway 61, the infamous Highway 61. And one day he got up, and Dad was a big singer. He played the piano. His goal in life was to play the piano for a gospel group known as the Blackwood Brothers, which were based in Memphis. And so he loved music, and he was trying to get up and motivate the men in the church, because 90% of the choir were women. And I remember my dad was just always telling my mom, we've got to get more men in the choir. He got up one Sunday and he said, folks, we need more men in the choir. Right now, we're top heavy with women. So, you know, he caught what he said afterwards. Of course, you know, everybody knows my dad said, well, that's just Jim. But anyway, it's a privilege to be in Hutto, Texas. I think you've got a great community. You have a great market. You certainly have a great economic development staff. I've had the privilege of knowing Scott Martinez for many, many years. I could tell lots of stories, but I won't today. But Scott, really, you've got a gem. There are very few people in this business that truly understand how to really promote economic development, all aspects of economic development, and really do their best to maintain a balance between local charm and the growth that obviously comes with being a suburb of a major city. So you're fortunate in that regard. Today what I'm going to do is kind of take you through this retail market analysis. There are a lot of parts to retail. This is a business that has certainly changed over the years. You know, a lot of retail has been, as you know, affected by the economy. We'll get into that a little bit. A lot of retail, as you can imagine, a lot of retailers are kind of pulling back. Most of you probably know that 2/3 of the national economy is built around consumer spending. And it's obviously a problem when people stop spending money. That has a ripple effect, a very negative impact on our country, and you've seen that happen across the nation. Now, Texas is usually pretty fortunate. We're typically the last state to go into recession, the first to come out. But there's no doubt that we've all been hit. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. We've been hit pretty hard, but we don't feel it as much if you go to the Midwest. Go to Chicago, go to Detroit, Michigan, go to parts of California. There is a real economic problem. But I'm happy to say that I'm in Texas. We're one of the best economies in the state. If you took Texas out of the United States, it became its own economy. It'd be the 18th largest economy in the world. So that speaks volumes. Now, I'm not promoting secession, but I'm just saying we'd be 18th in the country. So we have something to tout. I want to get into kind of some retail trends and what's happening. Mario, with that, I do want to say this is pretty much your market here. I can sum it up in 3 Ds: Mexican restaurants, clinics, and convenience stores. That's exactly okay. All right. Does anybody get that? Okay. All right. Next. Yeah, another couple more Mexican restaurants, Mario. I think that would do it here. No, seriously. Retail has, again, changed the economy. A lot of what we're seeing today is value-oriented retail. And I'm not just talking about value in the sense of discount. Now, when the economy goes south, I had one friend in the retail business. He said, well, it's time for all the bottom feeders to come out, the big lots, the discount guys. But honestly, when retail goes into the mode that we're in, obviously people look for bargains. We're seeing 50, 60, 70% off sales that we typically didn't see before. So when you see value-oriented, don't just think about big lots, Walmart, discount retailers. Think about people getting the most bang for their buck. That's what people are looking for when you go. You still want quality, but you certainly don't want to pay, that high premium. So certainly that's really the trend in retail now. The old adage in retail is location, location, location. Well, it's been replaced with location, timing, politics. Let me explain. Location is still important to a retailer. If you're most any retailer, whether you're a chain retailer or whether you're a local mom and pop store, it all comes down to what's a good location for me. It shouldn't just be happenstance. You say, hey, I just think I'm going to go do a business. There needs to be planning involved. Do we have the right target market here? Do we have, if you're a national chain, is there enough what we call retail density, population density? And they also like to kind of cluster together. Let's face it, when you see a retailer like Walmart, Lowe's, any of the national big boxes, notice that clustering effect. They want to be next to each other for one reason, traffic. You don't see Lowe's over here, Home Depot 10 miles away. It's just that clustering effect. That's what they feed off of, and that clustering impact. Politics has become really key in retail. Now, I worked in a lot of communities as a local practitioner and as a retail consultant. I can tell you, across the country, what I'm seeing is a trend in what we call big box limitations, square footage limitations. I worked in a community outside of Atlanta called Peachtree City, Georgia, one of the first master planned communities in the United States. And it was a very quaint community. They did have some, big box retailers, Target, Lowe's, but one of the problems was a lot of people realized and said, hey, you know what? Let's keep it at a minimum. We don't want any more of those guys anymore. So let's put a cap. No more than 32,000 square feet. No retailer can build over that threshold. So that is a trend that you're seeing in the United States, and that's typically outside of metropolitan areas and suburban communities. But you are starting to see a little bit, and I'll talk about that later in the political arena. You are starting to see the Walmarts, which Walmart actually has had a smaller concept for many years called the neighborhood market. They didn't really push those as much, but they do exist. A 32,000 square foot grocery store, which is really just to basically take the Walmart grocery portion out of the store. That's what they've done. But they do recognize that they probably should reduce their concept where possible. Now, let's face it, if you're a big box retailer, there's only so much space you can cut out to put your merchandise. You don't want people on top of each other trying to get around the aisle. So it is a trend, and the politics has really become a critical issue. You talk to most retail developers, they'll tell you that's one of the key issues that they ask first. Market is important, but hey, is this a community that wants retail? Because if not, they're certainly going to move on to areas where they feel like they've got a better shot. Retailers, as you can see, a lot of retailers are moving away from the old cookie cutter. You remember it used to be McDonald's had that same, mojo, Burger King. Well, now retailers recognize that every market is different. What we're seeing with bookstores, Barnes and Noble struggling, Borders went out. A lot of people like to go to the bookstores and hang out. Well, now you notice McDonald's starts doing kind of a new trendy store where they have the flat screen TVs and kind of have a coffee shop feel. You're going to continue to see retailers play around with that, because that is really what they're after. Is how do we go in and make it different, and not just get the same old market concept, the same old store footprint. Let's change it up a little bit and see if we can really make this work. I don't have to tell you, internet, smartphones have changed retail quite a bit. Scott here, he orders 90% of his stuff online. I order about 0. We're all different. There was I think it was probably 10 years ago, a projection. The guy said that by 2015 we'll all order our vehicles online. Not me. I'm going to go drive the thing. So we're all going to be different, which retailers like. Some stores lend themselves. Obviously, you have to have a brick and mortar store. Certainly a restaurant. You can't order food off the internet, but it's a little difficult to go out online. But when you're talking about, books, the Nook, the iPad, look at what it's done to Borders. Borders shut down. Barnes & Noble certainly has felt the pinch. They're all trying to scramble to be able to compete, but it's very difficult when you lose so many of your retail sales. Certainly they still benefit on the online sales, but that reduces the need to have a bricks and mortar store. And it's a shame because some of those are really good stores. Franchising, as David and Shauna saw last week, it's always existed, but a lot of retailers are franchise driven. It means that you may not have a retailer in Hutto not because you don't have the market, but because they don't have a franchisee. And I'm going to make a recommendation to help Scott and the staff, kind of target some events that you could kind of attract some franchisees, because a lot of people would love to get in franchising. It's just they don't, maybe they don't understand it, and they're all different. McDonald's versus, there's a retailer we'll talk about called Zaxby's. They're very interested in these type markets, but they've got to have a franchisee to come in there and do it. And it's really a good business, especially if you have a good market for the potential retailer. So we'll talk about that briefly. And again, the economy has forced many retailers just to kind of go into slow down mode. We are starting to see a little bit of an uptick. And actually, some of you may know this, the benchmark, or really kind of the telltale sign for an improvement in the retail economy, is the sale of men's underwear. Now, I'm not lying. That is the benchmark of retail sales. And actually, those sales are going up. So men keep buying underwear because that will continue to show that our economy is moving in the right direction. I don't know how that happened, so I don't make that up, though. All right, trade area. We're going to get right into trade area. Trade area is a critical part of any retail market. Now, when you look across, a trade area, it used to be a city would say, well, hey, we have, 5,000 people. When I first went to Granbury, some of you have probably been to Granbury, a little bit outside of Fort Worth, about 30 miles south of Fort Worth. We have right now about 8,000 people. But it's very deceiving because we have a trade area that goes out probably about 90 to 100,000 people. Once you get outside of Granbury, there's nothing but really small rural communities without a lot of retail. Stephenville has some retail, but we have the Lowe's and Home Depot that don't. Glen Rose, we have a nuclear power plant. So if we were just to sell Granbury as the market, same thing with Hutto. If we were to just sell Hutto, a lot of people would just, that's nice, but they're looking for a much greater area. And a trade area, again, is how far are people driving consistently. Retailers like, on average, they like people to see once a week. That's what they're concerned about. It's great to have a Highway 130. It's great to have some of these kind of ancillary benefits, but typically retailers like that primary trade area. Now, it's gravy on top. It's like being on an interstate. It's hard to measure, how much traffic comes in. I mean, it changes. So certainly that's gravy on top. But retailers, they want to see that core. Who's going to come here consistently? And that's really important. Again, competition, traffic patterns, population density. Those are really the three keys to a market. Certainly when you're outside of a major city, it's very competitive. We'll talk a little bit about that with Stonehill Town Center. Certainly Round Rock, a very large community next to you. Georgetown, you have a lot of competition. The good news is, though, you've got some great sites, and I think you're in the path of the next retail boom. So that we'll talk about that too. The goal of any community is simply to extend your market. Your goal is to get more people coming into Hutto to shop. You certainly want your citizens to shop here, but you want other people. You leak out, we'll talk about a little bit the amount, but you leak out quite a bit of dollars, obviously, to your neighbors. So you want to bring that back around, have your neighbors come back and leak some of their money over to you. It's really kind of a weird cycle, but ultimately your goal is to extend that market out, bring more people in, and that will, again, you get that increased sales tax revenue, which is critical, moving forward. I don't have to tell you, especially the city folks, it's really important to keep the sales tax going. You certainly get the property tax, and then really retail is quality of life. There are some people when they make a decision where they locate, it's proximity to retail. How close are we to, Kohl's, or how close are we to, certain retailers? It's really important. There are traditional methodologies that I've fought with retailers over the years, and you understand why. Typically, what we call radial or concentric zone methodologies and drive times were really created for metropolitan areas and peripheral areas of major cities. Now, the problem with some of the methodologies, if you did a 3-mile radius, we'll go to this real quick here. If you do a 3-mile radial of the intersection just outside of where we're at right now, Ed Smith Boulevard and Highway 79, you would get 23,412 people with a projection of 2016 of 27,803. If we did a 5-minute drive time, 13,164 today, 15,633 in 5 years. Now, and we'll talk about that retail polygon that I did. You see the difference, 56,906 and the projection of almost 68,000 by 2016. So, there is a limitation of a generic radial map. Now, a lot of retailers still like to use that because they still believe that, yeah, we want to see what the density is. The problem is the limitation. Now, if you're a drive time, a 5-minute drive time, all of us, it would take probably different times for us to make it to a certain point. It may take me, 10 minutes to get to a point in Round Rock. It may take you 5, depending on how fast you drive. It also is dependent upon speed limits. What about train tracks? There's a train track right outside of here. Well, what happens when that train stops traffic for about 5-10 minutes? Okay, so you begin to see the limitations. What if there's a lake? Lake Granbury, we have a giant lake that traverses right through the center of town. We have a railroad track as well. So all of these are affected. They're very generic, so that's why it's important to really showcase a market. Now, one of the key benefits that you have is Lowe's. Now, Home Depot, Chili's, you have a lot of really good retailers. But Lowe's is really unique for you because there aren't that many Lowe's in your territory. And the ones that are in existence are in high traffic areas. All of that congestion will make a lot of people say, hey, let's just go over here to Hutto and get in and out, especially the folks, Paloma Lake, all those areas on the western side of Round Rock. You want to pull those folks over there because they have high incomes, and like everybody else, they don't want to get caught in that quagmire of traffic congestion. By 2020, the projection is Austin, Texas will be the most congested city in the United States, surpassing Los Angeles, California. Well, I believe it. I drive 35. I avoid it when I can. I drive 281. So the future holds, I think it's going to hold a lot of good things for you, especially with 130, because people shop convenience typically now. They are trying to get in and out of a place as quickly as possible. We're all busy, kids, you get home from work, you're ready to go home, you just want to go grab something and then go to the house. You don't want to get caught in, all the traffic congestion. Now, some of that is just going to be a part of it, but that's what people are looking for. Now, you've got the marketing flyer that we did, and we're going to call this really a primary trade area. This is typically what a lot of retailers will look at. And based on talking to the retailers, this is a good snapshot of where most of your retail comes from. Now, typically a primary trade area is where about 75–80% of your retail comes from. Now, certainly you're pulling from a little bit wide radius. I mean, you're pulling people like Taylor, even Granger for Lowe's, further south, Rockdale, Pflugerville, Round Rock, and Georgetown. Now, the problem becomes if we start drawing this line too far out, a lot of retailers go, well, you know what, Round Rock has all of this retail, Georgetown has this retail, Taylor has a fair amount of retail for their size community. But the natural, what they call the gravity model, says that a lot of people from Taylor commute into wrong metro, Austin area, and they're going to come through 79. Now, if we take that trade area much further out in a primary, the incomes will go right down. And one of the key aspects of retail is incomes. You want to showcase that you've got a high income. What does that mean? Disposable income. It means you have more money to spend on retail. That's a very big deal to a retailer, especially as you start getting up into the Kohl's, the little bit higher echelon as you move up the ladder in what we call soft goods, which will be, I think, the next wave. So this is a good snapshot. And again, again, if we did a secondary trade area as well, you could show some of those outlying areas, but the incomes begin to drop significantly because you begin to move into rural communities. It happened in Granbury. If we have a lot of wealthy retirees. If we just did, a 5–10 mile radial, we've got about $90,000 median household income. If you go out another 5 miles outside of that, it drops to about 68,000. So you begin to see that you start kind of knocking your market down just a little bit. But it is important when you talk to retailers. I know David, Sean, and Scott, do that. Is hey, we still pull from Taylor. We pull from a lot of areas, and certainly there's some other things we'll talk about that will help enhance that. And again, we showcase if we just use these generic models, you undersell your market, and that's the problem with retailers. And they do look at that area outside of that. And certainly you have NewQuest that has property, Endeavor. Those guys are accustomed to seeing that as well. A lot of people still say, yeah, what's your 5-mile radial? But they do want to know how far out are you consistently bringing folks, because they want to make money. They don't want to cannibalize themselves, and this is an important note. Retailers typically in larger markets, you see a lot more Targets closer together, Walmarts, because of the population density. But what we saw really in the 90s and even after the turn of the century, a lot of retailers they got excited and they were just in expansion mode. And you saw that with Starbucks. Starbucks overextended themselves. They went into iffy markets, and they shut down, I think it was 600 to 700 stores a few years ago because they got excited. They saw, hey, we're blowing and going, and then the economy went south, and it's like, oh, well, maybe we should have looked at that market a little bit differently. Leakage. I don't really like that word, but let's just say outflow of dollars. Retail leakage has really kind of become, something that cities have become accustomed to marketing, because for many years we didn't really understand leakage, and there wasn't really a lot of good information out there, honestly. And I'm going to hit some highlights, and we'll talk about methodologies. Really, when you talk about leakage, it's the difference between actual sales and all the different, each retailer in each industry, as you probably know, is in a classification. It used to be known as SIC codes, and now we have NAICS, which is basically the same thing. Everybody is kind of classified in a category, from restaurant to lumber, Lowe's, general merchandise, Walmart. Everybody's broken down in their own little categories. So, you look at those categories, and we're able to, through a lot of different companies with data, we're able to find potential sales, which is really based on a lot of factors. It's based on what we call the Census of Retail Trade. It's really based on a lot of different factors, Bureau of Labor Statistics. And then actual sales, we know that there's an actual sale from the state comptroller to retail sales. You can go online and see the different parts of sales tax, where your money's coming from. Well, based on just kind of hitting some highlights of certain categories, you see, and you've got some of these, I think, on their flyer that you've got there. Look at supermarket. That's not a surprise. $89 million for your trade area. And again, these numbers are probably just a tad conservative, because retailers typically like to use conservative numbers, because they got into trouble when they started, saying, oh, well, this is probably more like 150 million or 200 million. But the reality is, you've got a huge, huge void in grocery stores. I don't really have to tell you that, because you drive right up the road every day, probably on Highway 79, HEB Plus, Walmart, Randall's, moving south. You're having to shop pretty much outside the community for groceries, and and it's really tough, because the grocery store is something you go to once a week. Now, we just had HEB open up in Granbury, and I finally realized how many times that a woman can go to a grocery store. My wife tries to go there 3 times a week, so I'm like, hey, Shandy, we have to live. But neighborhood grocery stores are critical to a community, and with your growth pattern, it makes sense to have one. Now, we can all surmise, and probably we would kind of hit the nail on the head if we start going down the list, because you've got the Walmart at the border, you've got available land. I really believe, and I know David with EDC will work hard to really promote this community, but I think there's some real advantages that they're looking at, and I think it would not touch the sales of other stores that are nearby. I firmly believe that. I don't believe, even if HEB went into this market, they would cannibalize their store or even touch their sales at the HEB Plus, because they have such a vast market with Round Rock. It doesn't make any sense that is somehow going to affect another location here, even in Taylor. I firmly believe that that would not touch that one iota. And I think that's a plus for you. I think they recognize that. And I'd be surprised in the next 5 years if you don't have some form of grocery store in your community, because you have a vast market. You have just a glaring gap. Clothing stores, like Granbury, we have to drive to Fort Worth. We have Bells, and that's pretty much our extent. Most of you probably go to Stonehill Center. Of course, you got an outlet mall, but less than 10 minutes from your house. Clothing is what we call soft goods, and I think that's really one of your key needs that we'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. General merchandise is basically Walmart. Walmart is at your border, so I don't know that Walmart would look to duplicate a store here. That doesn't mean they wouldn't consider one of their neighborhood market concepts, which they are promoting for suburban submarkets in major cities. That's kind of going to be, I think that's going to be their format moving forward in a lot of markets. Limited service restaurants, I put that on there. That's more like fast food where you order at a counter. Again, you've got some great restaurants, and I love that you've got a lot of local flavored restaurants. How many of you have ever been to New York City? I'm sure most of you. You ever go to Times Square, and you get the big Marriott marquee there, and you have all the hustle and bustle, and you look right there in the center of Times Square. There's an Olive Garden right there in the center of Times Square. And my brother and I were sitting talking one day. We were just watching how many people were just packing this Olive Garden, and I said, you know what? You have some of the best restaurants in the world in this city, but everybody is running to the chain restaurant. And it's really kind of become a lot of our way of life. I mean, I think we all love local flavor, but sometimes you get a craving. You want to go to Chili's and get the old timer burger, or go to Applebee's, or go to Cheddar's, or some of the chains. But really, if you look at our way of life now and our patterns, we're in a hurry. I mean, we're always trying to get something quick. I mean, they located a Golden Chick about a mile from my house. I think we paid for that building 3 times. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of chicken tenders and fries. I mean, there's only so much I can take of that. But that will be a trend. You've got the market. You have a very strong core market. The good thing to me about Hutto is a lot of your core is right here together. You have a high school across the street. You have retail across the street. You've got 130 on one side of you. You've got plenty of land here. And once the higher education campus comes in, possibly the YMCA, you're building a core of daytime population, which is critical to retail. And that is probably, we'll talk about weaknesses in a little bit, but that's a big deal. Now, total retail leakage, and then again, this is just for the Hutto market. You're looking at about leakage of about $518 million of leakage. Now that, again, folks, is a little conservative, so it could be more like $700, $800 million, but that's a good figure to showcase that you have a lot of opportunity. And that's what you want to sell, not just to your chain retailers, but to your local merchants. They'll be able to use this leakage data from this report and say, hey, there's a real opportunity for jewelry sales, for different types of sales, not just the chains. We tend in this business to think strictly chains. There are a lot of good small businesses that want to open up, and certainly you have a nice core downtown. I keep mentioning, sorry to mention Granbury so much, but that's a town that really kept, kind of the motif. They have a great downtown. We have a lot of retail on Highway 377, our major corridor. But the good thing is they've kept that community spirit. They've been able to balance both the new and the old. And I love that about a community that can do that. That is really tough to do, but it's really important to keep that, keep your downtown strong, build up that daytime population, bring people in. Traffic is a big generator of retail. If you go to any town center, you go to downtown, it's all about traffic. How do we get people, in here? Just like a hotel right here, heads and beds, a retailer, it's how do we get traffic in here so they're looking around and shopping. Now, a lot of the data we talk about, and we'll talk about this and kind of the challenges, is a lot of companies, you'll see some of these, and I know, like TML and ICSC, you see these companies. Probably the 2 biggest are Nielsen, Claritas. You've heard of the Nielsen ratings. It's the same company. ESRI, Economic Social Research Institute, is a big data company. And Pitney Bowes MapInfo is a big provider of data. Now, a lot of companies use these, retailers like these companies. They've been around for many years, and they trust their data. One of the challenges that we face a lot of times is, data is data. It's all based on modeling. Once there's a census, everything from 2010 up into the next census is basically just a model. It's just a projection, and it's based on a different type of set of methodologies that they have. And we'll talk about some of the inaccuracies, but again, a lot of it's compiled from some of the sources we talked about. And again, a lot of it's based on estimates, but it's a useful tool when you're talking about retail. Now, these are just some of the matches. In the report, I go into more detail. There are over 6,000 chain restaurants and retailers in the United States. 6,000. And that number grows every year because we have all kinds of new concepts. But when you look at some of these right here, we think, based on my experience, they're good. Now, some of them you will hear, as Sean and David can tell you, a lot of times they'll say, well, hey, we either don't know the market or we don't really see that. But I'll tell you a little story. How many of you ever read the Panda Express? Anybody here? Well, Panda Express has kind of gone into more what we call freestanding buildings. It used to be they were malls, shopping malls, and airports. Well, now they've gone into freestanding buildings closer to box retail. Well, their typical criteria for a site is 65,000 people in a 10-minute drive time. Well, guess where they just located one? In Granbury, Texas. You cannot come up anywhere close to 65,000 people in any 10-minute drive time in our whole region. So it tells you that they have a base criteria, but they deviate all the time. They start, that's why the conservative, they start with a really high number, and then they go, okay, well, you got Lowe's here, you've got Home Depot. It makes sense. You've got that type of market that this would work. So, Taco Bueno, their criteria used to be 10,000 people in a 2-mile radius. Well, look at all the towns that have a Taco Bueno. I mean, if they went on that market, I mean, there would be a lot less retail, and it wouldn't look good for a lot of us. But the reality is, they start really with kind of a high bar, and then they start looking at a market. But a lot of it, again, is based on the clustering effect. The more retail that you bring in, the more that those other smaller ancillary retailers will follow and kind of cling to those, because they know if you're Walmart, if you're Target, Lowe's, they know you're going to generate a lot of traffic. They know that. It's a proven model. So they're going to follow that. Now, you go through some of these you may not be familiar with. Kohl's, I think, would be great because it's not in the market per se. It is, but you're far enough away, you're not going to cannibalize others. Now, if you're Pflugerville, you're a little bit closer in to some of those other Kohl's over in the Austin Round Rock market. Aldi is kind of it's not a new concept, but it's new to Texas. Aldi is a German grocery store. It's a small 16,000 square foot concept. They've hit the Dallas-Fort Worth market hard. So usually, once things hit Dallas, Houston, then they follow Austin, San Antonio. And it's really a good concept. They typically, ironically, they like to be close to Walmart's. It's just kind of their mojo. They feel like that's a good market. Dairy Queen, interesting thing about Dairy Queen, they get 500 inquiries a week from communities to locate in their community. 500 inquiries a week. So that's why we do a one-page flyer, because Dairy Queen, all the retailers, communities will send plats of sites, they'll send their life story, they'll send this much information. Anybody want to guess what happens to that information when they get it? Right in the trash. And it's on to the next. So that's why this is what you want to put in front of a retailer. Show them the market, because otherwise, and you probably saw the show last week, if you start giving them a big packet, they're like, they've got this big briefcase and it's getting bigger, and they're like, can you just give me a little jump drive or just a little sheet of paper? That's what this business is built around. Applebee's, there are a lot of, again, these are just concepts. Since Chili's is kind of Applebee's, they're kind of a similar but different model. Zaxby's, I believe, would do really well. Scott and I had the privilege of eating at some of those. Some of you might have eaten at one of those. It's really kind of hard to describe, but it's kind of a step up from your usual fried chicken. It's actually more like chicken tenders, chicken sandwiches, salads. You know, it's kind of something for everything, everybody. Now, there's another concept called Raising Cane's out of Louisiana. It's similar, but Zaxby's has a much broader offering. If you go to Raising Cane's, if you don't like chicken tenders, you got luck. That's all they have. So, and it actually does pretty well, ironically. Now, let's get in these next couple things, and we'll get into some final thoughts. You know, these are your market strengths. You have Highway 130. You're sitting at the crosshairs of a major intersection. That's Main and Main is what retailers love to say and be. They want to be at Main and Main. You'll hear that over and over again. Main and Main, because you're getting all that traffic from different ways, 79, 130. You know, they want to be in a place that's easy to get in and out. Now, that may be, we'll talk about that. I'll hold off on that one. Incomes, you have very strong incomes. You look at the chart. I mean, you get over $100,000. That's music to retailers' ears to get that high. You've got available sites, and I'll throw the last one with that one, infrastructure. You've had the foresight to actually put in infrastructure. A lot of times that's a holdup for development, this infrastructure, putting in the water, sewer, those type of things. And you're in, you know, the kind of the driver's seat on a lot of those because of the foresight. And again, I can't stress this enough, your higher education and the YMCA, restaurants, retailers in general, it's daytime population. If you look at your biggest weakness, you lose a lot of folks out of town every day. Commuting into Round Rock, Austin, you lose a lot of folks. Probably, you know, well, more than half, maybe 60, 70%, maybe higher. You know, I worked at a project in Keller, just outside of Dallas-Fort Worth. They lost about 90% of their community every day, left the community. About 30,000 people. And it takes a lot of potential shoppers away. This gives you daytime population, it gives you a lot of folks, and when you put it all together with the density that's taking place, it's really good news for you. Now, the big challenges, I've talked about population, the daytime population. I think that will certainly improve with these projects. You know, the Stonehill Town Center is nice. The ingress and egress is not, you know, real easy. So, you know, retailers like that. It's a 45, 130, you know, it's a hot spot. But, you know, if you can't get it out of a retail, you know, I can take you, you know, League City. There's some great developments that are hindered. Dallas-Fort Worth, if you go at 121, which traverses right through the center of the mid-cities, you can't figure out where to exit to get to the. You see, it's like, oh, there's, you know, well, how do we get over there? Well, guess what? If people can't get into your store, you're not going to do well. So ingress and egress is critical, and I think that puts you in a good spot. Again, the demographics companies have not kept up with Hutto growth and many high-growth communities across the country. I did a project in Princeton, Texas, just outside of McKinney, near Dallas, and it was another one of those communities that just, you know, these models have not kept up with reality. And the tough thing is, again, a lot of these retailers like these, you know, demographics companies. But, you know, for instance, you know, some of the companies for Hutto, they had a projection in 2010 that your population would be 2,750 people. 2,750 people. And you finished out in 2010 at about 14, 17,000. So you begin to see that these models. Now, if you're a retailer and you did, you know, a little radial around that, guess what? That number is going to be, and it's not going to, you know, jump out at you. Whereas in reality, you pull the real numbers, it's like, wow, you know, it's, you know, fastest growing community, high growth, perfect, good sites. So that's a challenge. The good thing is the census helps because it puts kind of a new baseline number there. And with the economy, the slowdown, the models actually may get better because, you know, we're beginning to see, you know, the decline. We're continuing to see that. But hopefully our market will continue to go back upwards in the housing market, and you will get back to you know, strong growth numbers. And again, soft goods, that's one of the best things to have because so many, you get a Kohl's, then you start getting, you know, the TJ Maxx's, you know, and some of those are around you, but there are a lot of anchors, junior anchors that are not in the market. You want to get things that are not at Pflugerville, you know, possible, because that will pull more people in this direction. If you just copy, you know, what's happening up and down, you know, 130 and over to Round Rock, it will have less of an impact. It will still be good, but it will have less of an impact. And again, we talked about franchises. It's important to have, you know, kind of a night. You know, a lot of franchises will come in and they'll bring in some of their food samples and they'll talk to community people who are interested in franchises, and they'll talk about the process. It's very important because a lot of a lot of retail that's been kicked to franchise development. I mean, think about it. You're basically becoming their banker in a way, and you know it kind of takes some of the burden off of the retailer. So it actually can be a good deal. ICSC, it's a great way to market. You know, Sean and David and Scott could tell you. It used to be that there were maybe 5 or 10 communities 20 years ago that went to these shows. Now, over half of the exhibitors at the show last week were cities. And it shows you how important retail is to communities. You've got some good brokerage firms. I know David has worked with quite a few in his you know, previous experience in Harker Heights. And again, you have to stay in contact with retailers. You can't assume that they know, like the Higher Education Center. You know, let's face it, if you're Target, they have one real estate person for the state of Texas. How can you possibly keep up with 254 counties and all the major, you know, communities in our area? Now, they do a lot of work with brokerage firms that know the areas, but you can't always assume that they know everything that's happening. You have to let them know and say, hey, here's what's going on. You know, here's where you need to start looking. Just a couple final quotes. You know, it's important to recruit all types of businesses. There are all types of chains, but there are also all types of local, you know, regional businesses that will enhance the community. And this leakage data, this information can be very helpful to all sorts of businesses. It's important to continue to drive traffic because retailers need traffic. It's you know, what drives their business, and it's often, you know, whether it's traffic counts or, again, daytime population, you know, if you get something that really brings a lot of people, they take notice, and that's pivotal moving forward. But again, you have a great community. You have a lot of, I mean, the potential is just not even, I mean, we can't, you know, begin to state how much potential you have. But I really believe the grocery store will be your next big thing, and certainly a soft goods anchor that will attract further retail. And again, it's kind of the rising tide lifts all boats. You want to pull in people who maybe don't shop in Hutto a lot, and then once they get here, get up to the downtown, to the Texan, Mario's, all the bakery store. You want to get them in all these businesses so that everybody is benefiting. You don't just want that chain to benefit. You know, we tend to think they're all bad, but honestly, a lot of chains, again, if they're franchisees, those folks live in your community. You know, they attend your school events. They have kids in school. So, you know, they are important, but they're not the only thing. They can certainly bring in a lot of dollars, but it's important to look at the whole spectrum of retail, small business all the way up to the chains. So anyway, I'll be happy to answer any questions and hear your thoughts. Yes, sir.
In your discussion about leakage, word either, but 518 billion going out and potentially could stay here. I know that we would never retain 100%.
Sure.
What percentage is that 518 billion to what the total retail potential is here?
Well, it's a pretty big. I mean, if you were just to get, excuse me, a grocery store, and let's just just use Kohl's as an example, because once you get a Kohl's, you get what we call the inline shopping centers, which could bring in 150, 200,000 square feet of retail. You know, generally the sales on something like that with a grocery store, the sales could be anywhere from 150 to $200 million. So that could be a big percentage. Now, again, with those estimates, the potential is probably a little bit greater, because once you start pulling folks from Round Rock, you're beginning to really, again, you've got high incomes, but there's some really wealthy individuals there. So, that number can go up exponentially. And 150, 200 million may be small.
But I'm trying to ask, there's a certain amount of retail that is done here. Is it, is it $500 million, and therefore this represents 50% that's going out, or you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, and if you look at the sales now, I think, and Dave, you can probably help me, but the total sales, I think, if you include not just retail, because you have other sales taxes that come in, but I think in the state, I want to say it was like $140 million. So, I mean, you're looking at, right now you're bringing in
80–90%.
Yeah, yeah, at least
70
to 90% easily. Because again, you look, you got Home Depot and Lowe's. I mean, and they again, they've suffered because of the economy, because they feed off a building and things like that. But once you start bringing in those things that people shop at, women especially, you and I could probably say how many times on one hand we've been to Kohl's or some of those stores in the last 6 months. I only go when I have to. But you want to build that daytime population, because you're right, it's a high percentage, and you've only scratched the surface of your retail potential. I mean, and that affects the EDC budget. I mean, one retail center could jack up their budget by 50%, 100%. City coffers, property taxes. I mean, it's a large figure, and the fact you've got infrastructure, that's one less hurdle that you have to cross when you get that. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have a question. I recognize that in communities, first of all, I thank you for an excellent presentation.
Sure.
I recognize that other communities do not have a grocery store. However, each individual communities that do not have growth patterns, they find themselves identifying with a particular way of marketing their community. Would you recommend that marketing strategies would be helpful if the city of Hutto would focus on that while we try to avoid these companies that we're talking about? Would
Absolutely.
that be helpful? And how would the dynamics work for us?
Eric, I couldn't hear your last part of your question.
How would those marketing strategies work in the dynamics to lure those companies that we're talking about?
The retail? Well,
Yes.
hell, and again, Scott just got back from Chicago recruiting daytime companies, and I think that's a huge deal. And you're right, marketing to retail, retail is by and large developer driven, meaning a New Quest or a CB Richard Ellis. They see an opportunity, they see a big piece of property in a nice community, and they go out and they go, okay, this is a prime opportunity. In marketing your community, quality of life is a big part of luring companies. Every day Scott and I get calls from people that say, hey, we want to be in a community that has X, Y, and Z. And it used to be that it was just nice housing and just a nice place to live. Well, now that's it's changed. Now it's a nice place to live. Retail. A lot of women. They actually had a project where one guy said, you know what? If y'all had Lowe's, Home Depot, Kohl's, or whatever, that's how he was making his decision based on what his wife said. And you see that a lot in corporate America. They're basing a decision on the whole community. So when you market your community, more retail helps you to say, hey, we've got this, this, and this. Because people don't always want to have to hear that, well, you can live here, but you're going to have to go over here to get this, this, and this. Even though, honestly, you're only a few minutes from Round Rock. People see something in 10 minutes now, it's an hour. It's just psychological. But marketing is critical, especially with quality of life. That quality of life has really become much more important than labor force is important, sites are important, but marketing your unique quality of life, having a nice downtown, and again you're moving out a little bit away from the hustle and bustle. You can actually see open fields here, and a lot of people just in Keller we had a couple of horse farms, and some people. All you see is concrete and just big development, and then you come to this open space and you're like, oh, wow, there's a horse. So you've got something there to market, and I would really hit that, not just in retail, but when you're recruiting a company, you've got an advantage.
I have a calling question.
Sure.
I also work in the political field, and I understand that process, but I also know that political influences and pressures for something such as this to get in a retail or a particular business, that helps. Can you elaborate on where you've seen that practice?
Well, politics, as I mentioned earlier, politics is becoming a bigger part of retail. A lot of it is based on the perception. And again, I get it. I mean, I understand. I grew up in small towns most of my life. Until I moved to Memphis when I was 16, I never lived in a town over 5,000 people. So, I grew up in very small town America. And back then, we didn't have the giant Walmarts. But I remember we had Kmart, but they usually had to drive 20, 30 minutes to get there. the big thing today is, and you understand from a small business standpoint, a lot of people look in big box and say, you know, you're the reason that small business is suffering. They look at Walmart, you know, Target, big box, and say, you know what, you're really killing our small businesses. Grocery stores have fought that for years. You know, we used to have a lot more locally owned grocery stores. Everything now is pretty much a chain. And when I was in Mississippi, we had a Winn-Dixie, and we actually did a Walmart Supercenter came in, and a lot of folks came out and said, well, we need to protect our local Winn-Dixie. Well, Winn-Dixie's based in Orlando, Florida, and they have had hundreds of units. So, you know, politics is critical, and if you get a big retail coming in, they'll fill that, you know, early on. Now, if they want to be in a market, they'll do everything they can to be there. But if they feel that political pressure to say, you know what, we don't want you, they can go to your border, and they can locate right there, and you lose all those sales. South Lake, Texas, one of the nicest communities you ever go to in the mid-cities of Dallas-Fort Worth, one of the highest median household incomes in the United States. Target came in. Their economic developer is a good friend of mine. Excuse my allergies. And he had Target coming in, and they had a public hearing on this project. And he said it was the first time in his life for any economic developer he's ever said that a policeman had to be with him the whole time in the meeting. And he was honestly worried because there was such a backlash against Target. Now, you know Target pretty well. Target usually targets a little bit higher income market, which South Lake fit. But you know, they pushed Target so hard and hit them so hard that they located in North Richland Hills 250 feet from their border. They lost $150 million in sales a year. Now, not all that's taxable, but they lost a big portion. So, you know, politics is politics. And, you know, that's why a developer or a retailer, when they come into a market, if they feel that, you know, we don't want you, you know, Peachtree City, Georgia, go back to that town, they lost about 500,000 square feet of retail just outside their county line. And, you know, and that's a decision every community has to make. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it does show you that, you know, if people don't shop in a store in your community, they're going to go stop in a store in somebody else's community. So politics is a big part of it. And, you know, whether the incentives, you know, that's become a bigger part of, you know, and that's a very, very touchy topic, but, you know, in this economy, those things have become more important.
Two things that also reinforces the points that I was asking to verify. It's an investment, is that correct? Who's to make that investment? Is it the communities or the retailers? Because I know what the answer is.
Sure.
Can you tell us?
Well, the investment of...
To invest on the marketing strategies and to invest in political influence. Obviously, it costs money. Those are things we can't just do without investing dollars to make that happen. So in doing that, who pays for that?
Well, I
Can
mean...
you tell us who does?
I'm sorry?
Can you elaborate as to who is best to pay for that?
Pay for
those
marketing?
plans?
Well, retailers do all of their marketing. Communities don't market. I mean, you can market, you know, through the trade shows, things like that. But if you're Home Depot, Lowe's, or Walmart, you don't really have to market much. I mean, we just go there. I mean, that's that.
I was talking about a community as a whole. So would it be the city government or the PDC or the community as a whole in terms of a community coming into that process to make that happen so that we can go to those companies?
Oh, yeah, I understand your question. It is important for everybody. You know, it's kind of the, you know, the coalition. You know, a lot of communities, it's, you know, some people, you know, want it, some people don't, but at the end of the day, it's your community. And you have to have everybody at the table. And I'm telling you, you know, 20 years ago, it wasn't really a big deal, but today, you know, they want to see the people at the table. You know, HEB in large part came to Granbury because, you know, the city, the county, and the local community had to figure out a way. We didn't have, it was unusual. On one side of the road it was wet, on the other side of the road it was dry. So they had to go through an election, you know, for HEB to sell liquor. So that took a lot of people, you know, all the horses moving in the same direction. So you're right, it's a group effort. It's not just one group, and that's political leaders, that's economic development, because it's your community. And you can't assume everybody else is going to do it for you. Yes, sir.
6 years ago, we had a couple of members of the city council, including our mayor, and several people from the EDC went to the ICSC International Convention in Vegas. And there were 40 communities that had booths there, and they were doing extremely well. And I remember Small in California that this was their 4th year. The first year they spent $50,000. This year it was costing them $400,000 to exhibit there. The people that were representing were city council members and Chamber of Commerce board members who were there. And the city council member that I was talking to said it was the best $400,000 their city had ever invested in anything because of the return they were getting. I don't expect Hutto to spend $400,000.
Sure.
But would it be good? Because there were a lot of small cities there, and I know that's 6 years ago. It's grown enough. It would be good for Hutto to participate not just in San Antonio, but on that kind of a level with the international convention.
Sure, and I know Scott's been to Las Vegas. The Vegas show really has changed a lot because of the economy. It used to be that there were 60, 70,000 people there. Now they're, last year was about 25, 30,000. So it is a good show. I always caution communities, you mentioned one of the key things is cost. You don't have to spend that much money to really get your message across. The best I've ever done in Vegas is setting up meetings with retailers. A lot of the retailers don't, not walking around per se. Some of them do, but most of them you have to try to set up meetings. But you're right, it is good to get in front of a lot of national, folks. I mean, there's a lot of development firms that don't know Hutto from any other market. So within reason, you want to be able to have representation. Now the Texas show, they're there to talk about Texas. You go to Las Vegas, it's you've got people from India, China, Latin America. So it's a good networking experience. But you can get out of it what you put into it. But there's a way to do it without spending that much money. That's a high cost. But if you're recouping that, you can show that, then that's good. But if Scott spent $400,000, I don't think he
wouldn't be here.
There'll be a lot of freebies for Scott here, but as you grow, I mean, there will be a bigger market for you to go to, a lot more events who you are. I mean, if I said Hutto outside of the state of Texas, very few people, are going to know. Just like Granbury, so you have to sell yourself.
Any other questions? None? Thank you so much.